And I'd like to call to order a special meeting of the Glendale City Council for January 12th, 2016. May we have roll call?
Councilmember Devine.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Karpetian.
Here.
Sinanian. Mayor Najarian.
Here. May we have your report?
The agenda for the January 12, 2016 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on Thursday, January 7, 2016 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. And will you read the first item?
Public hearing 1, Director of Community Development regarding consider proposed amendments to Title 9 and 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995 regarding medical marijuana dispensaries and the cultivation, processing, and delivery of distribution of marijuana. 1A, ordinance for introduction amending Section 9, 10.010, 9.10.020, and Section 30.10.070 of the Glendale Municipal Code regarding medical marijuana dispensaries and the cultivation, processing, and delivery of distribution of marijuana. 1B, resolution expressly prohibiting medical marijuana dispensaries and the cultivation, processing, and delivery of distribution of marijuana in the zoning ordinance.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing and go to Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. This is a rather unique and interesting item, the ordinance and resolution before you, because while Glendale has taken a position in the past as reflected on the ban that we currently have with respect to the dispensaries and other ancillary medical marijuana ancillary businesses and endeavors, the legislative landscape is continuing to evolve. You have the Compassionate Use Act, you have the the series of bills that the governor signed into law this past fall, and with that evolution, what we are recommending to you today is to preserve the City Council's ability to retain the sole discretion over the regulation of this industry in this community by way of these ordinances. And when you look at the ordinances, they seem like basically what they do is continue the ban, but they are affirmative steps that are required by the state if we are to retain that sole discretion. Otherwise, we are placed in a position where there is a dual licensing, a dual control between us and the state, which ultimately I don't think serves anyone any good. The council will likely, and we'll see through the League of California Cities, but you'll likely receive a great deal more education from many different sides of this particular debate going forward. But all these items before you will extend the current scenario, the status quo, until such time as you opt to change the status quo. So with that, I'll have Phil Lanzafame come up to introduce his team as they have put together the ordinance, and then from there we can answer any questions that the council has and entertain the public hearing. Phil?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, not a lot to add. Again, the ordinance before you really preserves your ability to control on a local level. One thing that I would add is we have a permissive zoning code, so we're asking you to also adopt a resolution. Part of having a permissive zoning code allows certain officials, namely me, to make different interpretations on things. We want to make it very clear and explicit by this ordinance and the adoption of the resolution that these uses are prohibited, and it's not something subject to interpretation by the Director of Community Development. Really, again, it's about preserving your local control. City attorneys worked on this. We worked with PD. Laura Stotler is here from planning, so if you have any specific questions, we have a team of people to answer them for you.
Okay. I do have one card, but let me go to my...
I just wanted to oh.
Read it.
I just wanted to make it clear that today we're not here to discuss distribution or sale or any of those aspects of marijuana. We are simply here today to discuss the ordinance and zoning.
Which is about the distribution.
By enacting this ordinance,
well,
you would, if you introduce and then subsequently enact the ordinance, you would be prohibiting not only dispensaries, but the cultivation, distribution, testing, all those other things. Again, as Mr. Ochoa had mentioned, you have to take an affirmative action to maintain that control. some point in the future, you could change your mind and say, we are going to allow one or other of these. But until you have that discussion, staff is recommending that you adopt this ordinance, to affirmatively take this action, and not leave it to the state to dictate what happens in Glendale.
If I may, the state created the system where they are going to create a licensing scheme, but the licensing scheme isn't in place yet. And the law says if we don't have a law basically preserving the status quo before March 1st, then we might be subject to that dual system that Mr. Ochoa referred to. So this essentially preserves the status quo and gives you the maximum flexibility going forward if the council decides to make a policy change.
Thank you.
Mr. Carpich.
Basically, this is a safety net for us. This resolution is a safety net to our ordinance that if it cannot be interpreted in any different way, basically, by anybody in the city. So
Yes,
that's
sir.
a good thing. Okay.
Okay. I do have a speaker, Dr. Raquel Kalajian. Come forward. You can have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you for listening to my address. The Compassionate Use Act, allowing patients with valid doctor's recommendation to possess and cultivate marijuana for personal medical use, was passed by the voters of California in 1996. Here we are almost 20 years later, and the medical cannabis still carries a heavy stigma with it, despite several bills being passed to regulate medical cannabis use. Glendale is at the forefront of entrepreneurship as a host to many thriving businesses and industries. Glendale's real estate is one of the most coveted in Los Angeles County, and I am a proud resident of Glendale. Regulation of commercial cannabis would demonstrate that the city officials do listen to the will of the voters rather than just seek to establish moratorium and bans over medical cannabis operations and uses under the premise that it is federally prohibited and a public nuisance. Allowing for licenses and permissions for some sort of cannabis activity will simultaneously increase tax revenue of the city, as it has done in Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, creating more jobs and driving the Glendale economy in a positive direction. Colorado's legal cannabis industry has brought in $700 million this year and is projected to bring in $1 billion for next year. My intent for appearing today is I would like to open an analytical testing laboratory in Glendale that will test for pesticides, bacteria, terpenes, and cannabis as required by Assembly Bill 266, Article 1, Section Z, and strictly under any and all applicable state laws and regulatory guidelines. As stipulated in AB 266, a testing laboratory means a facility, entity, or site in a state that offers or performs tests of medical cannabis or medical cannabis products that is both of the following: accredited by an accrediting body that is independent from all other persons involved in the medical cannabis industry in the state, and registered with the State Department of Public Health. Glendale's Land Use Code allows for both a research and development business as well as a laboratory, and California's Assembly Bill 266 specifically defines and differentiates between a marijuana dispensary and a laboratory testing facility. The exact definition in AB 266 states that a laboratory shall not, and I want to interpret, shall not distribute, sell, deliver, transfer, transport, or dispense medical cannabis or medical cannabis products from which the medical cannabis or medical cannabis products were acquired or received. Consideration of the specific definition of both laboratory and dispensary as stipulated by AB 266, a bill was signed into law by Governor of California on October 9, 2015. A laboratory is not the same or even closely related to being a dispensary. Laboratory testing operations should be granted permission by City of Glendale to operate in order to help pave the way for responsible, well-regulated medical cannabis operation in the City of Glendale. And I just want to close because I realize my time is up. I would like to finish with a quote from the Governor of Colorado, who feared a horror show after legalization, now says, "After the election, if I could have had a magic wand and if I could have waved it and reversed the outcome of the election, I would have done it," he said. "Now, if I had that magic wand, I am not sure I would wave it. Most people who were not smoking marijuana before it was legalized still don't. And we got all these young people, and they're here, and they're starting businesses, and they're driving our economy. My biggest fear was that kids would think since it's legalized, it's less harmful, he said. But now we have the money to stamp that out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just add one more thing?
No.
The March 1st deadline was
No.
removed. Sorry.
But let me ask the city attorney. I think I understand the speaker's concerns that she wishes to operate a lab detecting contaminants and et cetera from marijuana. Would enacting this ordinance in any way prevent that type of operation?
I'm not certain, Mr. Mayor. Let me refer to Ms. Stotler. I think she can.
Yes, it would under, as we have it defined under section 910.010, subsection E. Marijuana processing means any method used to prepare marijuana or its byproducts for commercial, retail, and or wholesale, including but not limited to drying, cleaning, curing, trimming, packaging, testing, and extraction of active ingredients to create marijuana-related products and concentrates. So testing is included in that. And then we also have delivery and distribution that would also be prohibited activities, as well as cultivation.
And if I may just add, Mr. Mayor, again, I think this collective suggestion of the staff is to preserve the status quo and have the broadest ban as possible, at least until the state has come up with its scheme, and then you all can review that and see if there's any part of it that you want to implement here in Glendale. If you pick and choose now, then later on you won't have that opportunity. And the other thing regarding the March 1st date, there's been a lot of discussion about that there's intent by the legislature maybe to repeal it, but it hasn't as of yet.
And so the idea that we have before you is to take a holistic approach, to say that we would look comprehensively at any number of things. Many of the medical properties of marijuana are and have been available in the form of Marinol now. I think the differentiation is folks want to smoke it as opposed to ingest it by way of a pill. Well, okay, does that have any impact in terms of the type of business, in terms of the type of quality, in terms of the type of either cultivation or distribution? All those things are all part of an evolving industry and part of an evolving legislative agenda. To rush in when there's no need to rush in. There's not a sweepstakes to get there first, unless the idea is to do it simply by way of revenue generation. And even if you're looking at it strictly from the revenue generation side, remember that the flip side has a flip side. I mean, it's one thing to talk about Washington or Colorado, but those two states have legalized from a recreational standpoint, not just from the medical standpoint. And if you look at some of the ancillary outcomes that follow along, there are a number of testimonials that might push the needle the other way. Point being, you, I'm sure, thoughtful as you are, want to have a comprehensive, holistic, top-to-bottom review of whether or not you should allow this use to come into the community. And I don't think that there is, and California has come a long way from the demonization that existed on this particular policy issue over the generations past. But there's a way to do it, I think, intelligently versus parsing it out in small little pieces.
I mean, the testing, I think, is unusual because the possession rules remain the same. We're not affecting the possession rules. And let's say someone is a valid, I don't know if they call them licenses, the medical referral document, obtains marijuana, thinks something's wrong with it, wants to make sure it's not poisoned, could not go to a lab and say, can you check this out? This is some bad stuff. Well, let me ask that question first. I mean, maybe that's a rhetorical question, but that's a concern I have. Also, I presume, I know that enforcement of possession isn't on the top of our list of our police officers, but at some point we would be doing testing to see if the substance is marijuana, and would that not be violating our own ordinance if we're calling our police officers to do testing? So I'm okay with everything. The testing is an issue. What if someone uses U.S. mail to order marijuana? Who's in violation there? The Postal Service for delivering it? Or the person who lives outside of the city who's sending it in?
usually the person who uses the mail service for the purpose of conducting illegal activity. As far as the testing of marijuana by law enforcement, police can answer that if you'd like. But again, what I think we're not suggesting anything should be put off the table, but right now we should start with everything as it currently exists, preserve the status quo, and then the council is free to look at all these options later on down the road.
Ms. Friedman?
No, I was just going to say, I appreciate the doctor coming in and giving her presentation, and there are certainly going to be a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurship as this industry evolves, but I do think it's a different discussion for a different day. I think the primary thing right now is to maintain our ability to control and to weigh in on these issues. If we don't pass this today, we don't have that ability anymore, so I agree that we should pass this and then maybe bring this back as soon as the law is implemented and we know exactly what we're looking at, because that's still evolving. So we don't know, and I don't suggest we try to craft ordinances based on laws that aren't fully implemented and that we don't have a good understanding of. I will just say that I voted for the compassionate use law, and the way that it's been implemented in the last few years is not what I envisioned I was voting for, because what we've ended up with is really a wholesale almost a legalization in the way that it's played out. And this recent attempt by the legislature is to clarify that and to really make sure that everyone understands what the laws are, which I applaud them for doing. And we need to see exactly what that is before we can then add ordinances to operate underneath that or outside of that, or whichever way. So I would suggest for the good doctor to keep an eye on those laws, and as they become cemented, to come back to us. And I'd be happy to have that discussion then about whether or not we should allow your testing facility and other businesses like that. So I would, with that, introduce the ordinance.
One comment to make.
Mr. Garpetian?
One short comment, and that is, I agree that we have to pass this ordinance today as well. And as far as the voters in Colorado, I don't know how do they feel today, because the reason they have $750 million in tax revenues is because they have more dispensaries than Starbucks in Colorado, and that was a report about it. And I don't know if anybody would be happy with that. But anyways, I just wanted to mention that we have to be very careful about it. That's all.
Does the upcoming, is this going to be a ballot proposition in November for recreational use, or is that?
There's probably been a lot of discussion about somebody putting a ballot measure regarding recreational use. I'm not sure if any of them have actually qualified, but I wouldn't be surprised, given California and where we are in our politics, I wouldn't be surprised to see it on the ballot either in November or sometime after that.
And that remains to be seen then, what language is in that proposition that would make our laws enforceable.
My understanding there's actually been a number of them floating around, so usually what happens is one or more of them qualify, and then the proponents kind of duke it out to see which one goes on the ballot.
Okay. Okay, so we have, are there any other comments? Okay, so Ms. Friedman has introduced.
Second her motion.
Well, yeah, so there was a introduction of the ordinance, and then we also have a resolution that we're asking you to adopt.
At 1B.
So do I make a motion to adopt the resolution?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second, I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Devine.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Garpetian.
Yes.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Thank you. Let's go to item 2.
2, Director of Community Development regarding public hearing to consider amendments to Title 5 and 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code 1995 and to the downtown specific plan relating to massage uses to be continued to January 26, 2016, City Council meeting at 6 p.m.
Okay. Do we need a motion?
Yes.
For
without
the
further
continuance
motion
to the
continue
date,
without
sir.
further notice.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second,
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Devine.
yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Garpetian.
Yes.
Sinanian. Mayor Najarian.
Yes. I did neglect to close the public hearing at 1B, at 1A and B. We need to go back and clean that up? We're okay. All right. Then that concludes the business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And we are adjourned.